Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the Struggle Bus, where we wheels an empty triangle. Today we have the final of our first three Beyond the Basic videos, and just like the other two, this one goes into a little deeper of a more difficult basic rule, and today we are going to be talking about playing away from strength. And this is kind of a follow-up to the video on influence. So if you haven't seen the basic video that I did on influence and explaining what influence is and how we use it, take a look at that because this is kind of a follow-up to that. But if you are familiar with influence, this will expand upon it. So we have a few examples to get into, and so we'll just jump right into the example that we have in front of us. But before we do that, let's talk about what this rule is and why this rule is. So those of you who are familiar with influence know that once you get influence, you want to use it to fight. And that is true here. And the way that we use big influence to fight is we push stones into it. And so in order to push stones into your influence, you need to be playing away from your influence. If you play too close, you are going to be pushing the stones away from your influence. And that would be using your influence to build territory, which is something we usually don't want to do. Sometimes there are times to do it, but usually you want to push your opponent into your influence so that you can get some compensation from the fight. So let's take a look at a simple example that we have in front of us. This one wasn't taken from a game. I just made up this board, but this could totally be a board state. All the other examples are from actual games. But so white has played inside our potential area, right? We were looking to build a moyo as black, and white has jumped in here. So the question is, assuming we want to respond to this stone, where do we respond to it? Do we respond at A, or do we respond at B? These would be the two logical places to consider. If we follow the rule of playing away from strength, we would want to play at B. This would be pushing white stone into our strength. In order to do that, though, we first have to acknowledge where our strength is, and it's pretty clear on this board that this group is very, very strong. So we want to play away from our strength. Playing on this side would be playing too close to our strength, and that would be looking to develop territory off of our influence, which is usually not what influence is used for. Also, when you play too close to your strength, as in a situation like this, you are pushing your opponent towards your weaker area. And now this demands a response, as where if you had pushed here and our opponent jumps, we can ignore this, or we can continue pressing on and go and attack this group, not looking to kill the group just by following the other Beyond the Basic rule, but we are going to be attacking this to try to get profit. But you can't do that if you're pushing it into a weak group. So that is typically why we want to play away from strength. So let's take a look at another example, slightly different situation than this one. So this is our next example, and this is taken from one of my recent games. I was white in this game. And so black had a plan here. Black wanted to build this large moyo, and that is perfectly fine. So the question is, if we're black here, where would we play to build our moyo, to get more potential here? If we follow the rule that says to play away from strength, we want to play as far away from this fantastic wall as possible. So I would be looking at a move, something like L10 or maybe M10 or maybe N11, somewhere around here to help build this potential and make sure we stay nice and far away from this wall. What I wouldn't want to play is where my opponent ended up playing, which was surprising me considering his strength. He played O12, which is much too close to this wall. And to help give a good example for this one in particular, I threw it into Codtrain to take a look at where it thought moves should be played. And so you can see the image in front of you, and here it shows how many points you lose depending on where you play. And you'll notice that the closer you get to that wall, the more points you end up losing because you're playing too close, as where if you play further away, you're getting closer and closer to the optimal move. So this is kind of confirming that we should be playing away from thickness, and that is both our thickness and our opponent's thickness. So in this case, our opponent played too close to his thickness, but if it was our turn as white, let's say that black just played away and played a move like this and we wanted to invade, a move like this would be too close to strength. In this case, it would be our opponent's strength, but this is still too close because now white's going to be in a lot of trouble. So the rule applies to both players. You want to play away from strength, and that is both yours and your opponent's. So let's take a look at the next example, which is a pretty simple one. And that is this example here. So this one's really interesting because as I was putting together examples for this video, I was looking at games from my students that I've reviewed, games that I've played, and then this one popped up on Reddit while I was putting games together. And this one is a perfect example of following this rule. And so the player in question had, questions about the game, but this was probably the largest mistake in the game. So we are black here, and we have strength all over this board, and white has jumped into the middle of it. So the question is, where are we playing now? Well, if we follow the rule to play away from thickness, we need to find where do we consider ourselves to be nice and strong. You'll notice I keep on flip-flopping between the term thickness and strength. They mean the same thing in the context of Go. Thick and strong just mean that the group cannot be attacked in a meaningful way. It's just too strong to be attacked. So if we look at this group in the upper right is clearly so strong there's no way it could ever be attacked. Same with the stones at the bottom. In this case, this top right group is the stronger of the two groups and is the closer of the two that white played. White failed to follow the rule and played much too close to this strength. So how are we going to respond to this? Exactly where we play, there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. But I would expect to play somewhere over here, some spot near these marked stones, playing on the opposite side of our strength because we want to chase our opponent towards our strength. Because if our opponent runs towards our strength, we're going to be able to dominate this fight. What we don't want to do is play where the player actually did play, which is N13, which is much too close to their strength and on the wrong side of the stone. Now the stone can just run back and live pretty easily while also destroying all of the potential that black had in the center of this board. So this one's pretty straightforward. We've got some trickier examples. So let's take a look at one of those now. Okay, so here we are with probably the trickiest example of the ones that we have today. This was taking a game from a student of mine. This is a game that I reviewed, and I thought that this was a fantastic example of how to follow this rule. If you watched the previous video where we talked about responding to attachments, you'll know that since white attached to us, we should be considering two options, either extending or playing the Hane. So there are really four choices where we can play here. In this case, since black has a lot of strength nearby, we should really consider the Hanes. They are typically stronger. They invite fights because a cut can happen. But if we have strength nearby, we can handle those cuts. And Hanes are typically stronger moves. So in this case, my student did acknowledge that and was considering which of these two Hanes should be played. Are we playing A or are we playing B? If we follow the rule of playing away from strength, we need to identify where our strength is. And looking at this, we have these four stones that are so very, very strong. So here we want to play away from strength, which is a little counterintuitive to what we would probably want to play, because I'm sure many of us would want to play B to build this up as a nice area. But the thing is, we don't get strength, we don't get thickness to build territory off of it. We do it to fight. We do it to get control of the board. So in this case, we want to play towards our weaker stones and away from our stronger stones, and we want to play this Hane. This way, if white wants to play over here, then this is fantastic, and we can do something like this to start a fight. And these four stones will be able to help in that fight quite a bit. More importantly, if white decides to cross-cut, then we want to make sure that we are helping our weaker stones, and these three stones are obviously weaker than these. And so this stone being closer to these weaker stones means that this group as a whole will be stronger. As where if we played on this side and white decided to cross-cut, we're now farther away from our weaker stones. and so it'll be tougher to endure this. Anyway, just a good example of playing away from thickness. It's worth noting that looking at this one with AI, both moves are acceptable. It does consider A to be the stronger move. So we're not going to lose games because of this decision, but there are going to be plenty of times where you do end up losing the game if you end up playing too close to your thickness. So one more example to help show this in action is from a game that I recently played. So this is from a game that I played recently with a study partner of mine. I was white in this game, and you can see here after this exchange in the bottom left corner that white is looking to build some good potential here. If white gets a move like e12, this is going to be a pretty scary area. And so black realizes that and decides that they need to do something about this. And black knows that they need to play away from strength, and so black played c10, which is a good way to break into here because black needs to respect the fact that these stones are strong and that you need to play away from that strength, because that is true for both your stones and your opponent's stones. So now it is our turn because we are white. And so the question is, how are we going to respond to this move? There are two kind of natural moves to consider. We can consider jumping out at A, or we can consider making a base at B. If we follow the rule that says to play away from strength, we should not be considering playing C8 because it is too close to our strength. Instead, we should be looking at A to keep these two stones split, as well as playing away from our strength. And this is what I ended up playing, and we ended up getting a good exchange out of this, and we were able to take a slight lead we would not have been able to have gotten if we had played too close to our strength. So I know that this rule is a little tricky. That's why it is part of the Beyond the Basics rules, but it's a really important one, as are the others that the videos go over. So this is the end to the initial Beyond the Basic rules. So I'm going to start using these in our bus ride games, and I will start labeling them as such. So anyway, I hope you guys learned something from this and the rest of the videos in these series, and hopefully you can use them to win more games. So anyway, thank you guys for coming out for another ride of the Struggle Bus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Have a good one, guys.